Hello and welcome to another video, and thank you for all your comments about where you'd like to go back in time to. I will say, there's this thing about your phone and people listening to your conversations on your phone. Since that day, my social media, Facebook, TikTok and all that stuff has just been flooded with AI videos of people going back to 1985. So yeah, we are definitely being tracked. But today we are actually going back in time and we are looking at a time slip that I guess is quite famous, and mainly because of the people involved in it, but also it happens in, I guess, you could say the most historical site in England. And this is the Avebury time slip, or to give it its proper name, the Avebury Fair time slip. So those that are not familiar with Avebury, this is the village that is surrounded by a stone circle and has got avenues of stones leading up into it. It's also where they filmed Children of the Stone in 1977. And this is quite embarrassing really. So when I was younger, my nan took me on a coach trip and we went to Wiltshire Caves. On the way back, we visited other locations. So I think on the way there, we drove through Bath and then went down to Cheddar Caves and back up. And we went to Avebury. And I didn't know we was going to Avebury. And we're driving down this road and I'm looking at all these avenues of stone just going down the road. And it absolutely petrified me. I'd watched Children of the Stone and that scared the life out of me. All of a sudden, we're driving down this avenue of stones and this big stone circle. We had to get off the coach. I refused to get off the coach. And I remember my nan trying to get me to come off and saying, no, there's nothing to be scared of and all that. And I wouldn't tell her why. Because if you touch the stones, you'd turn into stone. Completely frightened the life out of me. I remember eventually I had to get off that coach and we stood in like a cafe or a pub, something like that was doing teas. Everybody else went out and walked over to the stones of the stone circles, and I wouldn't go and made my nan stay in the cafe, so we didn't do anything. Avebury's own circles are around about 4,500 years old, so we are going way back in time for this. And it's actually, Avebury village itself is surrounded by this massive stone circle. Then you've got the trenches that go around it. It's probably got a real name for it, and I do know it and I forgot it. And then inside it, you've got two other smaller stone circles. One of them actually sort of like encircles some of the buildings of Avebury. And when archaeologists looked into this, they believe that in the centre of one of those smaller stone circles was a building, and that was lived in during that time of that stone circle being there. We could spend hours thinking about what these stone circles were. What were the purpose of these stone circles? But that would probably be a different video. But keep in mind, these stone circles were actually pulled down a lot of times and put back up again. So what you see there today has been replaced over many years. There is one stone called a barber's stone that when it was put back upright in 1938, they found a skeleton of an old barber underneath it. And the injuries sort of worked out that this stone would have fell on him and he died under that stone. And they found like scissors and all this sort of stuff under there, so they knew he was a barber. The area itself is worshipped by the Druids, and when you go there, there are a lot of Druids there. Now, I was meant to be there yesterday, but if you know what the weather was like yesterday, you know why I didn't go. So this video is actually made up of images I've been able to get off of the internet. Really gutted I didn't go there, but I can't always get out, and I'm trying to get the videos out that you want. I know some of you want the pub videos and all that, but I also want to get the ones that I love out there. So this is one that I do love. I love this story. The place itself has got so much history. It's got ghost stories about the Red Lion pub and all this sort of stuff, but we are going to be focusing mainly on the time slip, or I will say possible time slips. So there could be more than one. But the main event is from 1916. So Avebury is in Wiltshire, and it happened on a very rainy October evening in 1916. And Edith Olivier was driving across country and heading up to Swindon when she became very tired, and she pulled off the main road and found herself just outside of Avebury. She noticed all these megalith stones all the way down the side of the road, and then she pulled up into the actual village itself. She got out the car, and the weather was quite appalling. And as I say, this was late evening. She was looking over to where some of the stones were by the village when she noticed what she describes as a country fair. Now, these were shoeboats, rides, coconut shy, and all these people were dressed as if it was like a lovely summer's day and not the weather that she was standing in at the moment, which was torrential rain. She also noticed that these people were carrying torches, like flame torches and flares. And she's standing there observing them. And she thought this was rather a peculiar event due to the weather that was taking place. But after a few moments of standing in the rain, she had enough and she got back in her car and drove off. Edith didn't visit Avebury for another 9 years. And when she did, she was walking around the village and she bumped into a local historian who was doing guided tours around the area. And over a cup of tea, she told him her story about driving into the village and seeing this fair, and she asked when these fairs are held. The tour guide turned around and said that fair wasn't possible, as it hadn't been held in that village since 1950. Edith disagreed with this and said he must be wrong, and he assured her there's no way that she could have seen this fair. But on top of that, Edith's description of how she drove into the village and down this avenue of these tall megaliths. The tour guide turned around and said that those megaliths had actually disappeared before the 1800s, and only in the last couple of years have they been digging them back out of the ground and putting them back up. So that is the bare bones of Edith's Avebury Fair Timeslip story. But we need to know a little bit more about Edith and who Edith was. Edith is actually related to Laurence Olivier, sharing the same name obviously, but is related to him. She is a prolific writer and politician, and she was an influential member of the women's rights movement. She was a very, very well respected lady, but also somebody that knew how to do research and look into things, and she didn't take being told that she was wrong quite lightly. And she went off and done her own research. I guess that's a little bit like me really. If someone puts in my comments that I've got something wrong, and I go and do a deep dive on it to see if I'm wrong. I do admit when I'm wrong, honestly I do. But yeah, I think you have to learn. History is very, very changeable. Now, in my last video I said I love reading books. Well, if you read a book from 1973 on Avebury, it would be different and incorrect compared to the modern research. The modern research shows a lot more different time periods of the long barrows and the Bronze Age burial sites and the trenches around it, the earthworks. There's a lot of different information we can now do and gain that we couldn't do in 1973. So, as I say, the books there are different, and going back to 1916, people's view on the Avebury stone circles was certainly different to what it is today. Today we get a lot of druids going down there and use it as a religious site. Back then that wasn't such a thing. People didn't worship this area. Now when I say that Avebury wasn't worshipped in that way by the druids back then, it's not totally correct. It was, but not to the fanatical state it is now. People didn't go there to worship the solstice and that sort of stuff. But before that, there was periods in the history where did worship the druids there, and I do believe there's a druid burial down there. I mean, we could just spend the whole video going into the history of this place, but we're looking at the paranormal side of it. But we are going to touch on certain aspects of things like ley lines and energy lines, because people use that as an explanation to what is going on. And I will break that down a little bit because it may not be what you think, and this may upset some of those people here who do believe in ley lines, and yeah, we'll see how we go with that. But Edith did go off and do her own research. She was convinced that she was going to find that maybe 9 years ago a certain fair had popped back up and they'd done it as a one-off event. She went around the village and spoke to everybody who lived there, trying to find someone to back up her story of this fair taking place 9 years ago. Everyone told her that they haven't had a fair in that area in their lifetime. When she did bump into older people, they turned around and said they remember the year the fair stopped. So based on her own research, she had actually found out that the tour guide was correct. This is where she put it down to a time slip. Being an author and running these writer circles as she did, when she shared this story with her friends, and that is how we know about it today. And she wrote it down and spoke about it in a lot of her interviews. Now, Edith's story isn't the only possible time slip story we have of this avenue of stones and these stone circles. Over the years, many people have witnessed things that don't quite add up when they're in Avebury. I'm not going to say this is a trick of the mind, and if you go there with that mindset of this is a spiritual place and strange things happen, people say that the stones give energy to people and manifest certain things, and I'm not going to turn around and say this is where the stone tape theory comes from, where things get replayed, but over the last 100 years, people have turned around and said that when they're in Avebury and they're walking those stone circles, they see figures from the past. Just your normal villagers walking around the area, not in ghost form, but actually walking around doing something of purpose. So interacting with the land or doing something like that. And when I've approached them, some of them had conversations with those people and then go back to them afterwards to ask them another question, and that person has disappeared. I guess that would qualify as a time slip and not a ghost story. In 1930, this story reached the Ghost Club of Great Britain, and at that time one of the members was Lord Amwell. Now, he was a group of skeptics, and he took this on to try to debunk this story. He visited Avebury, also met other people around the area at the time, and worked through the evidence he could find. He could not disprove the evidence that was put before him by Edith of the description of the fair, the flames, the torches, the coconut shy, the people running around shouting and playing. It all fell in line with what he could find out that this fair was like around about 1840 up to 1850. But what he came up with was that maybe Edith had accidentally visited a different village. He went off to visit other villages around the area to see if they held fairs. And yes, they did hold these fairs. Now, not like with the flames and all that, but they did hold fairs in October. Now, he come back with the conclusion that Edith had got confused herself, drove through Avebury and didn't realise she'd come out the other side and end up in a different village. And by the very limited research I come up with, the only village I can think of would be West Overton. Now, I don't have any proof that this is definitely where he was suggesting, but on the small research I did, it does seem to be a village that would have had the size amount of people that could accommodate her vision of all these people standing around in a little village. I'm not trying to poo-poo all this story. It is intriguing. And when we talk about time slips, there's stuff that people say about ley lines. So we're going to touch on these ley lines. So I don't want to disprove everything, but the evidence is there that they may not be what they seem. So in 1920, a gentleman called Alfred Watkins brought out a book called The Old Straight Track. His idea was that he visited all these places across the country, and these were the best routes to follow in a straight line. But unfortunately, in the 1970s, this straight line thought, which is more about a passageway of moving around the country, got twisted by John Mitchell, and his book was View Over Atlantis, which was all New Age thinking, and he started to say that these lines were mystical energy that he called ley lines, and that is where we get all the ley line stuff from today. And these ley lines would all point up to Avebury and would all merge around the area and cross those tracks. Again, this has been sort of disproven, and there was somebody I used to watch on YouTube, Tom Scott, who done an absolutely brilliant video explaining this better than what I've done in this video now. But I say I'm not trying to poo-poo all this sort of stuff, but this is the issue with ley lines, is that they're 1970s New Age thinking. They're not old ancient thinking. So that is why there's not much reports of druids and earth worshippers back in Avebury before that period of time. So what would make Avebury somewhere where a time slip could happen? If you remember in the Liverpool one, we were talking about maybe the underground power lines that were causing this energy that triggered this event. I'm not saying Avebury hasn't got that. What Avebury has is stones, and lots of stones. On researching this, I see a lot of people poo-poo the power of stones and stone circles. I'm not saying they're magical. I am saying that stones, rocks have energy, and there's total proof of that. We use quartz in watches. We use rare earth metals that are found in rocks to power computers and all this sort of stuff. Rocks have energy, and there's no way of getting around that fact. Is it possible, if you have all these stone circles lining up, that you create some sort of massive timepiece? The energy is passing through this area. Is it possible that when the ground is wet, like it was in her story, that maybe energy is passed between these rocks and some weird event could happen? Could then we go back to the stone tape theory, that all this energy is gathered together and it replays an event from the past? I'm not saying it's a plausible explanation, it's an option. Many people will tell you when they go to Avebury and they're walking around those stones, they feel the energy of these stones. And what I put this down to, right? So when I've been to Lake District and we've done mountain climbing, I always feel that I'm going up a mountain on the permission of that mountain. Okay, if it didn't want me up there, I'd get that feeling that I shouldn't be up there. And it's a weird thing. You feel I'm crazy, but I feel like mountains are alive. There's an energy around them, and yeah, they are. They're full of this electric kinetic energy of, all stored up over millions of years. So I do believe that sort of thing, and poo-poo me as much as you like. But when I go to a cave or something like that, I do feel as if I'm surrounded by something that is a live entity. Even going down to Cheddar Caves, I just feel that it's a cave. It feels like it's almost breathing around you, and Wookie Hole and all that. It's what makes it more creepy than the fact that it could cave in on you any second. Which I really thought was going to happen to me last time I went to Wookie Hole. But if we take Edith's story, as she said it, it would fall in line with that option. That on a very rainy day in October, she's in an old car, 1916, remember? These cars were old. Well, to her they were brand new, but to us they were old. And they don't go fast. And she's travelling. She was tired. She drives into Avebury. She looks across and she sees this fair going on. And wonders why all these people are not dressed like she is. It's trench rain outside. She's probably got her overcoat on. And she's looking over there and all these people are dressed for the summer or dry weather at least, and they're carrying on as if it's not even raining. Could it be these stones are releasing their energy and creating this time shift in the centre of where she's looking? I wonder if other people were there around that time, would they have seen the same thing? I said, is this like the rainbow theory we come up with last time, that nobody sees the same rainbow? It's all from your perspective. It's how light reflects into your eyes. Would that be the same when it comes to a time slip? Would other people share your time slip? Now, we go back to the Bold Street one in Liverpool. We know that two people there said they shared the same time slip, but also gave slightly different accounts of what they saw. But from time to time, we do get odd reports about Avebury. And in the 1950s, we have airplane pilot flying over Avebury in a light aircraft. He describes that Avebury Stone Circle was all lit up. But yet when he reported this back, he has found that that didn't happen, that these stones weren't lit up in Avebury. So there's no explanation of what he was seeing from the air. Again, we have another one where we have somebody driving their vehicle, very much like Edith did, into Avebury, and saying that they completely missed the village, that they drove through there and they didn't see the village there at all. Now we know if that had been a confirmed time slip, he'd been driving across some sort of dirt track or something like that, keeping in mind that all these stones were never there all together in one point at a time. They seem to have been taken down, put back up, taken down, moved around. Now, even the cairns that are up on the hills on the other side, they were dismantled, and Historic England and English Heritage have restored them to what they think it looks like. So they're not the original cairns that you see. They found the wreckage of it and they put it back together to show you what was there. And it's very much like the Avebury stone circles. These had to be dug back out of the ground and stood back up. Now a lot of people say that Stonehenge is fake because they've seen photos of it all being lifted up and put back down. And yes, that does happen. Repairs to Stonehenge happens a lot. It's called maintaining an historical site. You can't just leave it there to fall apart. Otherwise you end up with somewhere like Easter Island where all the stone heads have fallen down and we've got no accountability of what actually happens to them. Well, we do now because it's now being restricted. But for centuries they were carried off and picked up and shoved in museums anywhere. It's why, as far as I know, I don't think we've got any stones from Stonehenge in a museum. A lot of people have said they've driven through Avebury and they've seen lights over Avebury, over the stones and all this sort of stuff. And this is where you're going to think I'm crazy. And this comes from a story that happened to me and my wife. We were driving down to Cornwall for the eclipse. I think I might have mentioned this before in one of my videos. And we was driving past Stonehenge. There was a blue beam of light. This was about 5 o'clock in the morning, so it's still dark. There's a blue beam of light coming right out of the centre of Stonehenge and going right up into the sky. Me and my wife, we just thought it was an effect that was going on at Stonehenge. Maybe something to do with the solar eclipse coming up and, they were just put something out there as a display. On the way back, we went to Stonehenge and spoke to people there about it. During this time you didn't have to pay a fortune to go close to the stones. And they said there was no way that there was a blue beam going up at the centre of Stonehenge. And they just totally poo-pooed it, said that we were making it up and it wasn't true. Me and my wife definitely see this blue beam coming out of the centre of Stonehenge. And I often wondered now, thinking back, was that guy winding me up? Was there actually a blue beam coming out of Stonehenge, a light shining up at Stonehenge, and you just thought it'd be fun to say there wasn't, to make me think I'd seen something weird, but debunking my own story. But stone circles do scare me. And it goes back to the Children of the Stone, and I can't help it. That programme has such a horrifying effect on me. Happy Days and all this sort of stuff, and the music that happened, I'm not going to pretend to say the sound that it made, the chanting sound. I remember when the coach pulled up, in my head all I could hear was that chanting music and looking at my name and being absolutely petrified. But there is something about stone circles that I do think have an energy, a power. Well, I try to disprove that things don't exist and all that. With stone circles, because of the stones are energy, I think anything is possible. If time slips are real, maybe this is a proper explanation for it, that all these stones create this energy in damp ground and made a connection. And now you're thinking I'm crazy. I'm just thinking out loud. I'm just saying it out loud. None of this is scripted. I'm just saying what comes to my head. But maybe that's a good point. It's like a clock, a connected circuit, and you're connecting this up and it creates that energy field in the middle. Now, it would be wrong for me to do this video on Avebury without mentioning the Red Lion pub. The Red Lion pub has got a number of ghosts around it. We do have ghosts of children that run around the pub, but the main one is someone called Florence. The story goes that Florence was married to the old landlord of the pub, and he went away for the Civil War, and this was 1643, and while he was away she cheated on him and got pregnant and gave birth to a child. On return, the husband found that there was another child in the family. Clearly wasn't his. Strangled Florence and buried her, well, didn't bury her, took her out to the village well and chucked her down the well. From that day on, she is meant to have haunted the Red Lion pub. Some people say they see her walking down the stairs, other people say that they see her in the cellar. These reports have gone on for hundreds of years, and it doesn't matter what landlord comes into that pub, they all say they feel her presence within that pub. A lot of locals who sit in that pub say the lights swing around in there, and apparently one gentleman who didn't believe the story of Florence was sitting there poo-pooing it, saying that everyone's making this stuff up, and the lights started swinging above his head, and he fled and never come back to that pub. Now there is a ghost report that sort of falls into that myth, or that ghost story, and that is of 1975, when the landlady is up in her bedroom and she's asleep, when she's woken up by the feeling of pressure around her neck. She opens up her eyes to see a tall figure standing over her with his hands around her throat. She freaks out, and as soon as she waves her hands around, he actually disappears. Now, she knew the story of Florence and come to the conclusion that this may be the ghost of the person who done it to Florence, the old landlord. A few days later, the landlady is down in the pub when she sees Florence walk across that pub, but as she walks across that pub, she turns around and looks at the landlady and acknowledges her before disappearing. It almost as if Florence looked at her to say, now you know what I went through. There is a caution note you should know about Avebury. If you go there to investigate these stone circles or paranormal, be careful what you see and what you do. There is a story from 2012. A group of paranormal people from Wiltshire went down to check out the stone circles and to see all these ghost stories, and there's lots of little ghost stories around the stone circle. I've not covered them in this video, but they've gone down now and they've set up video cameras and all this around the stone circles. About 2 o'clock in the morning, they see a figure crossing the fields and going in between the stones. They're convinced that they've seen this ghost. They move their equipment around to the other side to see if they can get any readings from it or anything like that. They crouch down behind the stones with their digital recorders and EMF meters to see if they can see anything. When they get a tap on the shoulder and they look round, and there's this tall white figure, a man with a grey beard standing above them, absolutely frightens the life out of them. It was actually a modern day druid that had come down. It's actually a modern day druid who had come down to do a ceremony in the stone circles. Saw these people wandering around and crouching down the floor and wondered what it was and come over to see what they were doing. So you can't always take it as said that what you see is a ghost, a cautionary tale. A bit like the old story of the man that kept putting on the ghost sheet to run around scaring people and got shot in London, the old bed sheets. So yeah, you have to be careful with things like that. Right, before I end this video, I just want to have a little chat about ghosts and the paranormal itself. Now, ghost stories have been reported for hundreds and hundreds of years, and there's millions of them. Is it because there's definitely something in that? No, these people do see these visions, these ghosts, they're a real thing. Or is it the fact that as humans, we can't accept that once you pass away, there's nothing there? Do we want to believe in ghosts because it means there's an afterlife? Or is there definitely an afterlife and what we see is the people that haven't transitioned to it yet or have come back from it to pass a message on? It just seems that even in today's modern world, no, I was in a pub, right? So this video's coming up that I'm doing on this place I went the other day. Not the Enfield poltergeist. I know I did end up at that house, but that was just a coincidence. We come from one location, I was driving down, my daughter's just watched all the Conjuring movies, and I went, do you want to see the Conjuring House 2 house? And we went down there, completely freaked her out, she loved it. But it's the fact that when I was speaking to somebody at this other location, They're telling me their ghost story. People in that pub that backed up that story. I've just told you I'm going to a pub. The pub's only a part of the location I've gone to, right? So I haven't given the game away yet. But the people in that pub backed up his story. One of them turned around and said, yeah, I see that. Yet at the same time, others in that pub were poo-pooing it and saying it was rubbish. But there's people there backing up his story. I don't think, it can't be that so many people are misguided in what they see. Although I'm sceptic, there's got to be something that makes us see stuff that is strange or weird or unusual, because there's just too many reports. There's just too many reports. Too many for it to just be a load of rubbish. There's got to be something either in our brains that trigger these sightings or just something, because there's hundreds of books. There's millions of ghost reports out there. I just find it completely frustrating that in today's modern world, where we've got CCTV everywhere and everyone's got cameras, we don't get footage of strange things happening. But saying that, with the AI coming along, we're never going to know what is true and what isn't. And that's been a problem for about the last 20 years anyway, with video editing software, where people can fake ghost stories and ghost reports. So it's been an ongoing problem. But again, thank you for all your support. Thank you so much for buying me the coffee. That's a little QR code that comes up. You scan that and it takes you to a site where you can put donations. Now, so many of you have used that. That is absolutely fantastic. Thank you for all the super thanks on there. It all means so much for me. It enables me to go out and travel. It stops my wife moaning at me that I'm wasting my time going out and doing it, because if she sees what I'm getting in through that sort of stuff, she thinks I'm appreciated and that it's okay for me to go out and spend a day travelling around filming without her and my daughter, which sometimes I have to do anyway. Hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't, hype it if you get the hype it link. I still haven't got the hype it link on my phone, so I don't know how that even works yet. And this time what I'm going to ask you to post is your childhood memory that scared the life out of you. Was there a TV show or a location that you went to as a child that had an effect on you that frightened the life out of you? So just put down whatever that was. For me, obviously, it was Children of the Stone. So see you next video. Bye.